We made this.
Hello everyone, you're listening to Ask Us About Loom, the adventure game podcast that covers point-and-click adventure games, narrative games, interactive movies, choice-heavy political simulators, those kind of games that somehow don't seem related but are somehow in an umbrella term of adventure. I am your host, Matt Latham, and I'm glad to actually bring a full episode for the first time since December. So we're at the end of April. The only thing I've had released is about a couple of weeks ago. The news that I mentioned that I'm planning on working on a full set of season 2 episodes to be aired from September. But this is a special episode because this is going to be one of about 2 episodes that will air before September, and mainly talking about a couple of games that I really liked last year. But I'm not going to be alone for this one, patiently waiting on the sidelines. And as I'll explain, the reason I played this game, it's Seoirse Dunbar from the Adventure Game Podcast here again. How you doing, Seoirse?
Hey, Matt, I'm doing very well, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm really, really good. I'm really excited to talk about it. I mean, so looking forward to this. So.
Me too. I've been looking forward since I played this game, and I'm delighted to hear that I had some good influence that you played, because we can get into it, but I absolutely loved this game, and delighted that I think you did as well. I'm looking forward to discussing it.
Yeah. So I think we need to reveal what the game is, which I'm assuming if anyone's listened to this and not read the episode on the podcast app. So why don't you introduce the game for us?
Well, as you mentioned, it's kind of a choose-your-own-adventure political simulator, which some people mightn't say it's, certainly not a traditional adventure game by any means, but I would still consider it under the umbrella of adventure / with RPG elements. And the game is Suzerain, which I have reviewed on the Adventure Games podcast at least 3 times, or mention it. There's one official review, and I think I've mentioned it a few more times, that Thomas and Laura, my co-hosts, kind of had to beg me to stop talking about it. So thank you for inviting me to talk about that game.
I can kind of hear Thomas and Laura going, finally he can get it out of his system. So this is the full, unadulterated, unfiltered Suzerain kind of... like chat and stuff. So I think released on December of 2020. Wow. Suzerain is a turn-based strategy video game developed by Torpor Games and published by Fellow Traveller. Released for Windows, the Mac OS, Switch, Android, and iOS, and at the end of 2020. As Seoirse said, it's a kind of political, kind of choose-your-own adventure type game. It's, I think, incorrectly categorised as turn-based strategy on the Wikipedia page.
I don't think it is. I mean, there are strategy elements which I'm sure we'll discuss, but I don't think it's turn-based, is it? I mean, I know it's kind of like, as I mentioned, some light RPG elements that, but even then, I don't think it's really an RPG. At least I wouldn't consider it like an RPG, like other games like Disco Elysium or anything that I've play to still feel quite different. But choose your own adventure, definitely. You do make choices in the game. And it's kind of like interactive adventure, like the text adventure, but then with some graphics like of the map. I think anyone listening, we're not going to spoil anything. So what we're going to do, we're going to have a brief chat about the game, and hopefully anyone who's not played it, who's listening, will probably think, "Oh, actually, I quite like to play that game." And then you can then listen to the second half. We'll give you advance warning when we start talking about spoilers and stuff. But I think Suzerain, it's kind of like set in a kind of fictional, kind of like almost Earth-like alternative universe in like a continent called, I think, Macopia or something. I can't remember the... This is where there's a whole codex full of the things which I've got. God, because I thought I was prepared, but clearly I'm not, because
Macopa,
yes.
Macopa, yes. So there's like a continent, and it's like kind of fictional Earth adjacent world.
Kind of like a fictional Europe, would you say? Kind of like Eastern Central Europe? Or America?
So, and you're playing Anton Rain, who's recently become the president of a country called Swordland, which has a very complex kind of political history. He's recently just been elected after, I think, the third president of Swordland, and he's the after kind of like an economic kind of crash, and before then there was a kind of almost dictator like ruler for about 20 odd years, who plays. We'll get into a bit more of that in the spoiler section, but yeah, basically you then kind of you've got a very kind of unstable kind of political spectrum appearing, when you've got
to say the least.
Yeah, to say the least and stuff. And so this is like the kind of 1950s, or the equivalent of our 1950s.
Yeah, set in 1954, I believe, in this universe.
Yeah. And basically you've got a kind of map which on the surface looks like a kind of strategy game, but all it does, it points you to click on something, and you then get kind of like an interactive story where you'll have up to about 4 choices or responses, and the games and decisions and the game and the story all unfold based on these decisions. It is pretty much like an interactive book more than anything. It's it's a Twine book, but like a Twine. If anyone's ever played anything on Twine, which is the kind of story based like choose your own adventure kind of book, interactive fiction stuff, it's like that more or less, just looks a lot nicer and there's a lot of work into it.
No, there is so much in it. I mean, we could literally spend hours just talking about the backstory and the history of this world.
Yeah,
it's you mentioned a little bit there where it's set and everything, and I'm sure we'll go into more detail later on. But it's just, I literally spent hours in the game on my first playthrough just reading about all of the history, the cities and countries and the characters and the news all the organizations and just everything in it. It's so detailed.
Yeah,
but you don't have to read all of that if you're playing the game. But for me, I thought I'm so interested in it that I really want to get really involved in this.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that's like one of the big appeals to you then. I think when you heard it, what drew you to play the game initially?
Well, I think it was obviously back in 2020. It's I think early 2020. It was one of these Steam festivals. I can't remember exactly which one. And I had a few demos, and I played a few demos. And I saw this, and it piqued my interest because, I thought, politics simulator, choose your own adventure. I thought, okay, sounds interesting. And then I played a demo, and it really got me interested because at its most basic, it's kind of, I think it kind of gives us an idea of what it would be like if we were president. We always say, what would we do if we were president, or if we were king, or if we were, and I'm sure you could say, I could do a better job than the president / prime minister of insert country here. Mm-hmm. Whichever country you're living in, I'm sure you've probably thought, I could do a better job than the person in charge. And in this game, it's kind of like, okay, well, really? Well, now you can test it.
Yeah.
When I played a demo, it just felt really realistic. That in a good way. I mean, obviously, it's not. There's more to it in real life, but it really felt like it gave me an idea of what it's like to be a president of a country. And it was fun, decisions that you have to make, the characters that you interact with, just the whole world felt real. It felt lived in. It felt like I was genuinely the president of this country, and I was, deciding the fate of this country. Then it's also, which we'll talk about later, one of the most frustrating games I've played, but kind of in a good way, because it's kind of accurate to what politics probably is like. And, you can mention any politician at the moment, if you want to say, the current president at the time recording, Joe Biden of America, or Rishi Sunak in America, whatever your politics, I'm sure for both of them, they can see just how frustrating it is to lead a country, because you can't do everything you want. You have to make a lot of compromises. And then you have all of this, backstabbing with you try and make deals with your cabinet. And then you have all of these things, with the people in a country who, there's unrest and I don't think it's a spoiler because this is in the Steam page. There's the potential for war. Your neighboring country, Rumburg, is kind of, it's already been advancing in another country, and then it's threatening you. So you've got all of these different things that you have to deal with. And it just felt very realistic, but fun at the same time. That it's one of these games you could, at least what I did, I really got into it. Like, I really got obsessed by it. Like, even when I wasn't playing, I was actually thinking, okay, how am I going to deal with this situation? How am I going to deal with these cabinet members if we're, say if we're working on the Constitution? How am I going to try and convince them? And it's not like the game, because the game is kind of linear itself. You can't really, a lot of the choices are a bit binary, shall we say? But it felt like you had the freedom to kind of choose what direction you want to take the country in.
Yeah, exactly. I think there are kind of fixed story beats that will happen. So there are certain things or certain characters that will have certain things that they will need to do. But it does feel kind of, even though those things are meant to happen, and again, it's kind of hard to try. It's kind of hard not to spoil it, but there are certain kind of key moments. But how you react to them, and they're kind of influenced by early decisions. It's very kind of complex in terms of choose your own adventure. Again, it's linear, but how the game kind of unfolds is that there are characters that will start changing their opinion of you, or start to react or interact with you in certain ways depending on your decisions and stuff. But you do have the kind of freedom to kind of do what you want. And it's not, this isn't a spoiler, just to, in case anyone is kind of interested. The party that you're in is a very kind of almost centrist, kind of flexible party.
That's at the very beginning.
Yeah, the very beginning. So pretty much, and the way the Constitution is that there's a whole thing about whether the president's got too much power. And at the start, you can kind of shift to whether you can kind of go, or are you very left-leaning? So you're going to try and you're going to go kind of left-leaning, going to be socialist, or are you going to be more kind of right-leaning or far, almost nationalist, almost kind of like communist or even dictatorship, and just basically start kind of murdering your opponents? So you're going to start kind of taking bribes. You're going to have your moral codes. You're going to stand up for your kind of self, like your own like kind of moral standing, and not like take bribes from businessmen who want to influence policy, blah, blah, blah. It's those kind of decisions that you probably will expect from any political thriller that you've probably either watched or read about in any films and stuff. But the way the game kind of allows you to kind of craft things. I mean, in the introduction of the game, you pretty much, it's a good 15 minutes long, but it'll just ask you questions, and you have the backstory of Anton Ryan, who you do play, and it'll ask you questions. So, and you say like, oh, you grew up in so-and-so, you grew up in so-and-so, or you grew up in so-and-so, and you can kind of change your character's backstory, and it has effects later on. It's that kind of interactive fiction, and that kind of thing kind of drew me in when I started playing. Yeah, started playing it as well, because I think the way I found out was through the Adventure Game podcast, which. As you're supposed to be my rival, you're not supposed to encourage. You're not supposed to.
I am the enemy, right?
Yeah. Unless you're deliberately trying to make me broke, I'm not sure. But
yeah, I think I'm deliberately. Yeah, that's the thing. Because we're enemies, I'm deliberately trying to make you broke, and I'm coming on this podcast to try and destroy it from within.
Yeah,
to try to make this as bad as possible.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
I mean, some people would say that I've been trying to destroy my own podcast for years, but
yeah, but yeah, no, I think it was when you was talking about it. I think you was reviewing it on podcast, and I remember it was like, I think it was a Friday. I was driving home and stuff, and I remember going, "Oh, I kind of like this and stuff." And I think I know a couple of my friends that will probably like it as well, and including Tony, who's been on this podcast, who was in the first episode of this podcast. I remember like saying, "Oh, talking about this game." That's just heard about this game and stuff, and even he was like, "Oh yeah, it's really good and stuff." And
I mean, the thing about this as well is it's easy to play. It's easy to pick up. Like, anyone can pick it up and play it, but it's hard to master. So to actually do well in this game, much like politics in the real world, is very difficult. Like, anyone could, you'd probably be a politician maybe, but then to be good at it, be successful, that's where it's very hard. But in this game in particular, you can just pick it up. You see very early on that it's, as you mentioned, the backstory, which you decide, whether you grew up poor, rich, middle class, and during the early times of your life, the story is set, but then how you react to these events, to different and again, it's very early on. So, the military coups, there's been several before the game even begins, and how you react to them kind of shapes who you are at the beginning. But that really drew me in. And again, I just thought, oh, this is kind of easy. But then, just trying as president, trying to keep everyone happy, it's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And it's addictive because you keep thinking, oh, no, I can do this. And then the very few wins that I got, certainly my first playthrough, I did celebrate. But then at times when I thought it was a win and then only for it to be snatched away from me, that it's actually quite difficult in a sense to succeed. But but just at its most basic level, it's easy to play and addictive. And that's, again, I think what would draw people in.
Yeah, I think because it's again, you can play it on PC and Mac and stuff, but you can also play it on the Switch. It's also on the Android and iOS, on the Apple Store. Which, and to be fair, I've played it on my PC, so I've not played the Switch or the phone version. But I mean, I can probably see how easy this is to play on the phone.
Oh yeah, I played it on Switch, and it was several times late at night when I should have been asleep. But I just kept playing this game on my Switch, and I just kept, okay, just one more round, just keep going.
And it's the way I think it is, because you become Rain and you can kind of shape your own character arc more or less.
Yeah. Because
the option, you get about up to 3 or 4 options while you're in conversations, so you can kind of craft.
Exactly.
You kind of craft your own personality and everything, and I think you start becoming emotionally invested. You start to understand the certain people around you, certain friends, certain political people that you can form your own opinions. So you'll have people, and you'll start to see how they are politically, and you can either be nice to them or not, or standoffish on them. And it's just, I just found, and considering it took me about 9 hours to get through the first play. Got through the first play, it's extremely kind of hooks you in and kind of emotionally as well, and there's some really good storytelling in it, which I think I'm counting at the times when we get past the spoiler mark. But
it's a very, very well written game, and I don't think it's necessarily character driven, because I don't think the characters are. And again, it's not a criticism, but I think it's more the whole situation that you are the president, that it starts with, this is the concept, this is what draws you in the game, and then it goes from there, that you can shape your own character and how everyone else can respond to you, and then the whole situation, you are the president, and then everything else. And then there are quite a few things that are, again, much like real life, if you're a president, that are outside of your control. Things happen that... whether it's unrest or wars or people doing things that, again, try not to give any spoilers, but that are completely out of your control. And then other leaders around you are, very different. There's more liberal leaning leaders, but you might have issues with them. And then there's more dictators as well in countries beside you. And then it's interesting how you deal with them. Do you support them or go against them? And you could also... there is one person one of the options is who doesn't like dogs, and you could give them, I think, a dog-shaped present or something just to kind of screw with them.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you have that option if you wanted to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that kind of thing and stuff. And I think, and before we get head on to story territory, I think the last thing to perhaps point out for anyone listening, listening and stuff, is that the game doesn't have a political bias, so it doesn't have a political agenda. And I know I recently listened, I think like a few days before this, I listened to the interview that you had with I can't remember his name.
Is it Atta?
Atta, yes. Who I think the lead developer from Torpor Games, who created this, and it was quite interesting. And one of the things that he said that I think's quite apparent is that they deliberately didn't want to put a political bias on that, or to put the political leanings of the developers in that, because they wanted the freedom to kind of make it realistic. So, and I think one of the quotes that I remember them saying, which I think is quite indicative of the game, is that they have kind of left-leaning or liberal-leaning players moaning that they were biased towards the right, and they had people who are perhaps more conservative in their kind of political views moaning that the game is kind of leftist woke nonsense, which is and I think one of his response, I think his response to that was like, yeah, that's great, that's what was after.
if both sides, if you're if you're making both sides angry, you're doing something right.
Yeah, and I think and that openness and that kind of openness and to kind of if you've got so you can kind of and I think like people naturally go in with their own kind of political stance first and then thinking, oh god, it's kind of like against that, but then if they try and do other things, they'll find out that the game kind of compensates for that. And I think that's one of its biggest strengths as well. So if you're going to come in thinking like, oh, it's going to have a certain slant to it, it really doesn't.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of, as you mentioned, it's a party that's very centrist. That was probably, going back with Dictator Tarkin Soul, that was definitely more right-leaning. And over the years, it's probably more people are becoming more progressive in the party. But you still have the, conservatives. It's probably half, because your cabinet is set. You don't get to choose your cabinet in the game. And you have probably about half the people are more conservative and others who are more left-leaning, who are more progressive. And this is like the element in the party itself that you have, again, people who are, really pushing the progressive agenda, shall we say, and then others who are wanting to be more traditional, more nationalist, want to keep things more as they were. You have to deal with both sides. And then throughout the game, you can decide if you want to remain centrist or if you want to go to lean more conservative or lean more liberal and progressive. So I don't think the game has any agenda. It's entirely up to the player here. I think that's one of the remarkable things about the game. And it didn't I played it twice. First I tried to be liberal, progressive, and then I tried to be the dictator. The nationalist. I went really far right in my second playthrough, but even like murderous and everything else. And but the game kind of doesn't really judge you. Okay, if you do start committing crimes and all, characters will say, well, you probably shouldn't be doing this. But it's I think it is remarkable that you can set the direction that you want to go yourself. That it's not the game judging you or telling you which direction you should go. That you have the freedom to go which direction you want to go to.
Yeah, and in a very kind of easy and simple way to play.
Yes,
and very kind of easy. You're quite surprised how easy it was and how it doesn't feel like a game, but you kind of get emotionally invested into it. So yeah, so if you've not played it, and we've kind of sold it to you, please go and play it because it is generally one of the better interactive story games I've played. And which will probably give you a hint of the way how this conversation is going to go for the rest of the episode. So,
and did we mention what it's visually like? So we mentioned that visually it's basically markers on a map.
Yes. Yeah, it's more or less just like markers on a map, and you're just reading text for the most of it.
It works, I think, very well. It's very easy to maneuver. I found.
I hope that we've sold it to you. Because...
Yeah, I hope so. I really hope that people play it. It has on Steam. Well, it got very positive reviews. It had overwhelmingly, but there have been overall 4,394 reviews at the time of recording on Steam. So, and I think, I mean, you could get to some criticism that people have. I think criticism have it that it's quite difficult, but then again, so is politics.
It's not an easy game, and I think it's gonna be a live syncing stuff. And I think one of the things I perhaps should have done is either invested in either the Switch version or the just so that I can perhaps just pick it up and play it again. And to be fair, I still might actually. I might get, even though I've got it on PC, I might get it on Switch just so I can kind of perhaps just play half an hour before bed or something. But it's that kind of game. It's that kind of emotional game, and I think it's a time sink that doesn't feel like a time sink, but I think it's a generally good time sink. So with that, I think it's time to finally crack open the floodgates, go into the spoilers. So this is your last warning. We're gonna kind of divulge into the kind of game and the story and everything. So yeah, so if you've not played it, I'll see you on the other side.
Oh my god, they all died.
Yeah.
Everyone they were died. Aliens all along.
There's aliens in it. But the kind of world building aspect of the game, one of the big key things and stuff is immense. The amount of kind of, I mean, there are obvious kind of parallels or kind of things that are kind of influenced by them. So like you've got the United Cortana states or something, which is clearly communist Russia. You've got Armenia, which is, I think it's Dwight Walker, is the president, who is clearly America.
Yeah.
And
I think is it Arcasia? Because I have it open here. Sorry, no, I have it open here. It's Arcasia, which is similar to the US, and United Cantana, which is similar to Soviet Union at the time.
And
then all these other countries in between.
Yeah, so you've got. So I think you're based on. I think the area is called the Antician, which I think there's a great kind of like almost official codex, they call it, which has like all the information on stuff, and like a great extended map of the kind of eastern side of Macopia, which is the kind of the thing that you're on, which shows you a bit more of the world beyond what the game says. So you get a rough idea of like a vaster understanding of everything like that. But the kind of like detail and the world, like the maps, are kind of feel like you're seeing a part of Earth that you've not seen before. It's like almost beautiful in terms of how well it's done. I mean, it's you are looking at a piece of a map, a very kind of small piece of a map for a while, but it's very well done. It feels so real.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think that is the crux of this game. We could spend hours talking about it, but probably the main reason why I loved it so much is it feels real. At no point did I think I am playing a game. At no point did I mean, of course, I always knew that I was playing a game. But, while I was playing, at no point was I taken out of it. At no point did I think, this is again. And it's, just the amount of work that the developers and the writers went into just creating this world. I would say it's probably the best for any adventure game I've played, or any nearly. And it's pretty, to mention Disco Elysium just recently, and other really good world building. You mentioned several RPGs, or The Longest Journey, or other games that have fantastic world building. But this is definitely one of the best, if not the best for me, out of all the games that I've ever played. Because, as I said at the beginning of this recording, I got obsessed with it. And it's not usual. I love playing games. I love playing adventure games. I started a whole podcast on adventure games, but I rarely get nearly obsessed with a game. It's that I started talking about, and I was talking about this game, to my girlfriend, to my dad, to my mom, and they were kind of interested, like I was telling my dad about a few things that are happening and asking kind of for his advice, what would you do if you're president in this situation? And he was saying, oh, well, I think I might do this, or what's happening with this? And it's just absolutely fascinating. I think that is the key thing that will draw people, drew me in, is the world building in this game. And also you don't have to read all this. You don't have to read all the newspapers in the game. You don't have to read all the backstory it has backstories on the countries, the cities, the history of Swordland, all the characters. You don't have to read any of it if you don't want to. Mm-hmm. Now I did, and it really, really drew me in. So that's kind of the main thing for me. Is the world building, which I think is, and I don't say this lightly, possibly the best of any game I've played.
Yeah, I think I can kind of remember because kind of like comparison. That's it. I've forgotten what the word comparison was for a second. To compare it, I remember kind of like when I first started watching Game of Thrones. I ended up kind of perhaps I shouldn't, because it spoiled about 5 seasons worth of stuff, because it basically I ended up reading about most of the stuff that happened in the books before the show got to them. But I remember kind of getting hooked into kind of the codex of the books and the world building of that. And like the in-depth and stuff like that. It's very, very similar. It is, yeah. The world building in this is ridiculous. There's so you've got under corporations, you've got kind of styles of governments, and you've got ideologies. But all the ideologies, all the terminology it's not. They use their own terminology. So you've got communism is actually, I think it's what you call Malevism, which is which is basically named after the leader of the United, I think it's United Katana?
Yes, Maliniva.
Yeah. But they basically they're kind of Russia, almost China kind of hybrid and stuff. So you've got
Maliniev.
Yeah, that's it, yes.
Sorry.
What you said, Maliniev, yeah. But he said, so it's basically a federalist socialist republic situated on the continent of Kontana, which is Kontana. So if you imagine Russia, but if Russia was its own separate continent, I think that's more or less it. There's a fan map that someone did on Reddit, because the Suzerain Reddit is full of people who are kind of like pretty much
obsessed with it as well.
Yeah, and kind of like really invested into the world, or theorizing about the kind of world that's been built around it and stuff. Someone's created a map, and like a map based on what they probably think the rest of the world's looking, and pretty much the majority of one continent is this Russia allegory type thing. And I think there's a couple of states underneath on the continent. But yeah, and I remember looking at that going, oh yeah, I can probably see why you could think that might be the case for that. I just hope that Torpor will actually release a whole full map of the world just to...
It would be very nice.
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah, just to get like an idea of it, because they've released the map from 1954, and I think they've released one from like the late 1800s
as well. Yes,
yeah, which again is quite interesting, which shows you a lot more about the history of Sutherland and when it was named something else, and but yeah, named something else and everything. But the main story around is Sutherland and the world around it, and I mean, I got really invested into reading about it because I was a bit unsure about what country it was supposed to be, and it was only like recently, and again this probably shows my kind of ignorance with a lot of like the minutiae of certain history and stuff. But then like there's a lot of I think it's Turkey, which is kind of the closest influence.
Yeah, because the developer, I believe, well, he's based in Germany, but I believe he's Turkish descent, or if not Turkish himself. So yeah, I think I was reading online, and I don't know if he mentioned it in my interview because it's 2 years ago. But he said, I think it's supposed to be based on Turkey, but other people have said for them it's based on a South American country that's based on, to them, similar to events that happened in Argentina or Brazil, or countries in Africa. Now, what I thought as well, it could be similar to Eastern Europe, to, Ukraine, for example.
Mm-hmm.
That I started playing it, well, the time that unfortunately the real World War started with Russia and Ukraine. And, because it was also this thing that at the very beginning you can decide, do you lean towards more to the west, to the Arcasia, which is like the United States, or do you lean more east to the United Kurtana, Russia? At the time. And I think that was something that Ukraine was kind of like, that was more east, but now it's becoming more western.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but it's I think it's what you bring to it as well, what the player brings to it as well, which is another thing that is kind of fascinating about it. But yeah, I think from the developers, it is supposed to be kind of based on Turkey, I think.
Yeah, I think the TV Tropes article on Suzerain has a section which, like a whole bullet points, which links a few of the kind of linked history. So the Renan Empire and the Kingdom of Sutherland are both to represent the Ottoman Empire. So I think Turkey, again, I apologise, my knowledge of the Ottoman Empire history is a bit lap, so if anyone
like mine.
Feel free, if anyone knows a bit better than me, feel free to just basically call me an idiot and say what actually happened was this. But I think Arthur S. Whiskey is supposed to represent the idealistic side of Kemal Mustafa Ataturk. I think so like Whiskey tries to create a multi-party democracy very similar to Ataturk. I think the Swedish Civil War and a kind of very left-wing socialist called Bernard Circus Murder are supposed to kind of are very influenced by, I think, Turkey from the 70s, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah. There's quite lots of what's interesting as well is that in the game one of the things you'll have is that there's an ethnic minority called the Bloods, and their influence on the Kurds. Of the Kurdish people.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Again, from what I know of them, which...
Yeah. And I think you've got, I think, Victor Solomlak, he's based on Saddam Hussein, who is he's the leader of the country that's to the west of Sutherland, which is Wayland. And I think he's supposed to be based on Saddam Hussein. And yeah, that makes sense with the way he looks in the game as well. Yeah, so he's got the kind of Saddam Hussein moustache, but then he's kind of very anti the blood this group called the Bloods, and when you compare that to the fact that you think the Bloods are the Kurds, that's very much like an influence on that as well. And it said as well, Arcadia and United Contana is very much like NATO and Soviet Union, kind of with I think Turkey as well. I think it's some not just Ukraine, but I think Turkey. I think there was because I think again my knowledge of Turkey's role or in relationship with NATO is very thing, but I do know because they've got a kind of in the news at the moment. I think they've got
I know Turkey are in NATO because again they are in the news.
Are they in NATO? I didn't realize.
Yeah, Turkey are in NATO, and again that's real world. That's why there's these issues with Sweden and Finland because Turkey was a country that was blocking both. Well, they're now allowed Finland in, but they're still not allowing Sweden.
Okay.
And all the countries in NATO have to agree. But, Anyway, that's real world stuff.
Yeah, but that's that kind of influence. So I think that basically the threat of the Turkish element is there and stuff. And what I found quite interesting is that I think TV tropes assumes that Rungberg is interpreted as equivalent to the Kingdom of Greece, but so Rungberg is the kind of country that's the north and west of Sutherland, to kind of engulf the majority of it. And when you look at the map, when you look at the zoomed out map, they are absolutely a massive country.
Yeah.
But I assumed that they were a mix of basically the UK and Germany.
I thought so as well. I thought there was a bit of UK because there's Queen Beatrice.
Yeah.
Now, again, personality-wise, she seemed to be very different to the real Queen Elizabeth. Whatever you say about Queen Elizabeth, she was never like a real warmongering queen, thankfully. But yeah, I got, again, with every country, there's elements from certain real world countries, but then they have other elements that are kind of fiction, taken from other countries. But I always thought that Rundberg was kind of definitely from the UK. And Greece would make sense. And maybe Germany as well, or Central European countries. As well, just to have this big. It's kind of like if the UK and Germany and Central Europe got together, became one country.
Yeah, but then I think it was an autocracy rather than
the Queen. If kind of the Queen was warmonger, she took over Central Europe.
Yeah. So I think so pretty much like it is that kind of thing and stuff, which is but that kind of mix of like, what if this and mixed with this and stuff, and again kind of highlights, I think, just the kind of interesting kind of what ifness of this alternative history. Well, I say alternative history, it's like a completely parallel universe, and it's like say, what if we did this, this, and this, and it was like this. So like, what if Saddam Hussein was basically Central Europe rather than the Middle East, rather than that? I just find it kind of fascinating that the whole kind of world building aspect of that. So you get caught up in like a country that you're kind of close with, which is like a small country on the northern.
Agnolia, I think.
Yeah. Which I that apparently have kind of close ethnic ties to the Swordland people. But then in fighting over this island with, I think, Vagsland, is it? I think it's Vagsland.
Over an island. I mean, it could be, I don't know, again, my real world knowledge, it could be anything. It could be from the Rock of Gibraltar, with again the UK and Spain, that they're not at war, but they're both claiming it as their own, or anything else that two countries kind of disagree on. But also what is interesting is that, when I first started playing, I thought, they're going to have Valsland as the bad guys and Agnolia as this liberal democracy as a good guy. But it's not quite like that in the game. That the Agnolian elements in that island, they kind of do some bad things as well. And the people on that island, a lot of them are kind of like pro-Vagsland. And it's kind of like at least my alliances there were kind of like, ooh, this is kind of complicated.
It's like, so that kind of like the whole foreign policy stuff, and like we've gone about 15 minutes talking about the world and stuff, and it's only a small part. It's not actually the full plot of the game.
And it's not. This is again, as I said, you don't have to go into this much detail into the world. You can just play it. You said it took you 9 hours. It probably took me similar first playthrough, a little bit less the second playthrough, because I didn't have to read through all the backstory.
Yeah.
But again, it's not necessary. You can just fly through this game in a few hours if you wanted to.
Yeah, but I think I think the foreign policy elements kind of really hooked me in, because I did history for GCSE and A level, which I don't know if there's an equivalent in Ireland, but I think pretty much I got to about year 9, about 14, 15, and my kind of final exams in
probably the leaving certificate in Ireland. Is
so
equivalent.
So you had choices of what lessons to do, and I did history. Then I stuck and did history during sixth form, post 16 when I was 17, 18, and I love doing history. But the bit the bit I always liked the most in history was the foreign policy stuff, or the international relations section. That's always been the bit that fascinated me, and that's why I kind of hooked in on this. So you'll have moments where, like, as Rain, you'll go to like the equivalent of whatever the equivalent to the UN is. I can't remember. It's not
Alliance of Nations, I believe.
Yes.
I think.
The AON, I think it was.
Oh yes, the Alliance of Nations was the kind of fictional United Nations.
Yeah.
And then there's a fictional NATO.
The ATU.
The ATU, and then there's a fictional
Soviet
countries that come together as well. And then again, you can decide during the game if you want to join one or the other, or just remain neutral. Do a whole Ireland and Switzerland.
Yeah. So basically, that part of the game hooked me in. So whenever you had to go and speak to kind of foreign policies and stuff, or speak to like heads of different countries and everything.
Myself too. Yeah.
I love that stuff, and I felt like ooh, and like telling like people to like F off, and or being quite firm with people and trying to be strong. I love that bit. But again, it's only a small part of the actual plot, because the main plot involves kind of Rain's kind of handling of a broken system and trying to. I think the main thrust is that they said to people they want to reform.
Yeah, so it's a 4-year term. It's your first term.
Yeah,
and again, the game starts off. You don't have the election. You don't have to play through the election at first of the game. So you're the president. You've got a majority. So they think it's going to be easy, but then you have so the economy is going very, very badly. There's a recession, and then there's a very real possibility that there will be a depression. So you have to kind of figure out, along with your cabinet, how you can improve the economy. I think there was record unemployment. So that's, I think, one of the main parts. And the second main part is the constitution, which we mentioned earlier. That's people generally want it to be more democratic, but then there's the conservative elements in your party and other parties that want to keep it, maybe like that, or, more nationalistic, more traditional. So you have to kind of work with everyone else. And at least in my playthrough with the Constitution, trying to do deals with people. And I had a plan to go with more conservative elements, and I tried to get too much for the liberal, but then they said, oh no, we go back. And it was what I wanted. But there was a twist in my playthrough. It was the same with you in the Constitution. I didn't get it. People kind of backstabbed me.
So I think with my first playthrough, I ended up going through like, okay, I'll go and play it the way that I'd go and do it.
Exactly. I was doing the same.
With the exception that a couple of times I misclicked on a couple of things.
Too.
Yeah. Which is the reason my first playthrough, and I didn't mean to. I accidentally clicked on helping the Saddam Hussein one, kind of stop the Bloods trying to escape into our country, which was really annoyed me, because the game auto saves every single thing.
And you can't go back then.
Yeah. But for the most part, I went with my kind of like almost like left-leaning, almost socialist kind of Green Party-esque views. So my kind of political leanings are towards that. Sorry if anyone listening who doesn't share that, but I kind of went like that. I thought, like, no, and like any time to be progressive. So like all the progressive people saying like, oh, we should be teaching kind of like at one point, I think the Minister for Education saying all the girls are just being taught how to sew and cook and stuff. They need to be taught everything. I'm like, yeah, definitely, we need to do that because we need to be equal and stuff. And then suddenly there's like, oh, we need to reform the healthcare. Do you want to go privatisation or anything? I'm like, no, we can't privatise the health, right?
but then you need money to
Yeah.
so
And
have all these decisions.
Yeah, and I basically buggered everything. I tried to be, and I said, people are saying, "Oh, do you want to scratch my back?" And I said, "No, I'm not going to do dirty dealings and stuff." And you get to the bit where, and I try hard to like say to be kind of keep my moral standing, and then you get to the kind of key points in the third act where they vote for the reform, and I got my arse kicked. It was absolutely embarrassing. So like it was like almost. Basically, it's like Liz Truss levels of
Oh, I was similar.
Yeah.
Again, like yourself, I was more like a very left-wing version of Liz Truss that basically screwed up everything, and trying like yourself to be morally upstanding. But then I realized very quickly, you need to actually have compromises, which I tried. I actually started off centrist, trying to have compromises with people, but then I became more and more left wing as the game went on. But then I had all these other people with their vested interests going against me, and I was like, maybe if I had still stayed a little bit more centrist, but a little bit still left leaning, try to have some more progressive things going through, I might have had more success rather than going all in, going all Bernie Sanders on it.
Yeah, I tried to get all Bernie Sanders on it, I think. Yeah.
But what happened with me because again, I thought I did well in the game with the whole negotiating with the Liberals and the Conservatives. I got them to agree on a constitution, but then the twist for me was I also agreed that we would try Tarkin Sol for the crime that he committed. That didn't go down. And that was what screwed me up, because he appeared and you had the options, to try and rectify it. But I just said, no, let's see how it plays out. Turned out that was the worst decision I could make, because he convinced people in the parliament who told me that they would agree to that they would agree to vote for the constitution change, and then they say, we're voting for Sol, we can't try him, so we're going to not vote for the constitution. And it turned out to be a major embarrassment for me.
Talking
that
Sol,
I never really recovered from.
Talking Sol, I think he was the dictator for 20 years, and I quite like the fact that one of the key things was that because he had, I can't remember, was it a veto or at least he still had a lifetime constitutional thing, whereas but then because of the way that it was set up, there's is it Edward Alfonso, who was like second, who's basically he's the person, he's the kind of Liz Truss messed up. He did the Liz Truss thing and mess up the economy. The economy is his fault because he tried to. I think it's Alphonsonics or something. There's a very kind of like weird name they gave his economic policies, but his economic policies crashed and everything. But then, because of the way the Constitution was written to the fact that Tarkin Sol still had the ability to have, I can't remember if it was a veto or something which could sway people or have a vote in there. And one of the things you could potentially do as a kind of reform is to remove that. But he's like this distant figure that you kind of not hear about. You talk
and
about,
then he appeared as there and then.
There's like a tense moment where you kind of have you're at a kind of movie premiere.
Exactly, you meet him in the bathroom. Isn't it?
Yeah, and I was quite surprised how nervous I was. I was amazed. I was really nervous, and I was surprised. And I think that's either because of the way that the text kind of moves, and because you're in the first person most of the time. So Anton's talking to you in the first person, and the dramatic stuff. Then that kind of the music kind of kicks in, and then like Tarkin Sol's portrait comes in, and he's like very combative, and you have to try and talk to him, and it's. And then when he turned up, he actually he turns up in the vote because he wasn't expecting to, and then it's like, oh crap, what's he doing here? And
and I'm sure there's a way to deal with that, and to sure if we played with a walkthrough, we could maybe get them to it, because I did check for walkthroughs after my 2 times playing it, and it did say if you get to agree to your votes that it should be easy enough. And I was like, easy enough? I screwed up the first time. And then the second time I went all dictator, so there wasn't even a vote on the Constitution. I just declared an act of emergency with the unrest. I thought, and you mentioned there as well about the try to be morally upstanding. What I liked is that there were kind of consequences for everything, because, with these things, like the female students just doing sewing and cooking and knitting, and you could choose to vote for workers' rights to improve them, and to vote to improve women's rights, which I would hope that most people, whatever their political views, listening to this podcast would probably agree. Workers and women and all, but then there are consequences in the game that, if at least what happened to me was, I had this company building the highway in the rural parts of the country. And again, you had the choice between doing that or building the railway, which was probably what I should have done. But anyway, and then I signed off on the workers' rights bill, but then that affected the project. That affected the construction project, because now that workers couldn't work longer hours, they had to finish, say, at 5, 6. They could only work a certain amount of time. So then there was a delay on that project, which made it go over budget. And then people lost trust in my government because we couldn't deliver on time like we said we would. And all of these effects, and likewise with voting for the women's rights, that cost more money that I didn't have, or the government didn't have as well. And that kind of like helped, I'd already made other mistakes, as well in the game. But I really liked how kind of like, you made it think one way, you'd probably think, yeah, no, definitely going to do this, but then it's going to have these. And as you said, like, privatizing the hospital, no way, we're not going to do that. But then it's like, okay, well, what else do you do?
Yeah, because then that takes on the budget, and then you've got... But then there's like an actual pandemic that appears, which
yes,
which again in the interview they mentioned that because it was developed beforehand, it was before COVID, yeah, so before COVID,
which is amazing.
It's kind of like kind of weird, but the way they think it was I think it's polio that gets. I think polio strikes.
And you can choose to just vaccinate everybody, or to deal with it, or if you have decided to kind of spend money on the hospitals and health system, it's better to deal with it. But then if you decide not, because there's a second of the game where you can decide to, spend money on, is it the health, the education, the military, and the security, or you can take away money. You can go to -1 if you wanted to. And yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And then if you decide to vaccinate everyone, because my first playthrough I managed to avoid the pandemic. But which again, looking back, could it be, knowing what we know now, if it was more quote unquote realistic, we could have people protesting against the vaccinations.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I thought it was fascinating the way they introduced that as well.
Yeah, I think if there was perhaps one slight drawback, I think, of the game that the one thing that I probably noticed after the vote was that I kind of decided to kind of craft my own character arc, and I thought, right, after the defeat, I was kind of morally standing. I thought, okay, you know what? What's going to be more interesting? I'm going to go TV season on it. I'm going to make Anton get really pissed off at people and start being a dick to everyone who is again. So I started being a lot more snappy. But I think, but annoyingly, I don't think the game picked that up. So I think the game was a bit too late now that the characters weren't reacting to the fact that I was a bit more icy and stuff. And I thought, you know what? I think there's a couple of decisions about budgets afterwards that you have left, and I started to put it towards either the military or anything. But then it was too late because I think what's his name?
The military guy.
Yeah.
What?
Seoirse Lancia. Yeah, basically then got me arrested and did martial law. And
that was my ending as well.
Yeah.
And I could kind of see it coming, but there was nothing I could do to, at that point, because it was was it David Whiskey, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, whose own father in the game had been arrested long before you became president. And he was telling you to be careful. It's like, yeah, I know. But none of the options were for me to leave with my family. My character, Anton Rain, was still going on for a second term. And I was like, no, you've messed everything up. Nobody's going to vote for you.
Yeah.
Just get out of there. And he had then, in my playthrough, he then decided, yeah, I'm not going to go for a second term. He told his family, but then you get to knock on the door from Yusuf, and you were arrested. And I was really, which I can guess in real life as well, I'd be really frustrated because, yeah, I wrecked the economy, but I thought I did some good things as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing as well. Because I think I kind of maintained maintained the spending with the military. I never kind of took anything away.
Well, yeah.
I never did. The only thing I could think of is, and I'll talk about the backstory in a second, is that there's a choice because I think he's a commander when you're like a young thing,
with
and there's
immigrants.
There's an incident.
I was against him at my first playthrough.
Yeah, there's an incident in the kind of the backstory crafting, which, to be fair, he's like, as much as he's just text and saying it's a like multiple choice quiz, I think it's fascinating because it has impacts later on, and we'll go back to that in a sec. But yeah, including the fact that there's one point where you're on the border to Wayland. Is it Wayland?
Wayland, yeah.
Wayland, yeah. And there's bloods trying to get through, and I think he tells you to stop them coming through, but you let them.
Yeah, you can choose whether to stop them coming through, send them back to their country, or you can just let them through.
Yeah, and I think I let them through, and he didn't like that, and I got to, and he keeps bringing it up, and I got a feeling that's why he did the martial law, which I was a bit. Yeah, I think I think I was just in a prison cell and I just got put in a prison cell for. I don't think I think it's extreme.
Yeah, it's now again. People could argue, if we mentioned this to the developers to Latham, I'm sure he'd probably say, well, this has happened in real life.
Yeah.
That people probably didn't expect it, or people who thought they did a good job, and then they were arrested by the military commander. Just because, it could be very simply that the military commander wanted power himself.
Yeah.
So just president framed the person and say, arrest you on trumped up charges for treason. I think it was for me. Now, I never did any treason, but then I suppose this has happened in real life.
Yeah. So but I say, so my second playthrough, I ended up, and I never finished I'm not finished my second playthrough actually. I never got a chance to, but I pretty much changed, because you can change the look of Anton Rain. So I had a kind of beard, of beard, very kind of smile. The second one, clean shaven, bald head. I pretty much made Lex Luthor. I made Rain look like Lex Luthor, and I made him an absolute bastard.
Myself too. Yeah. Like, this was nearly the polar opposite of my first playthrough.
Yeah, and I was I'll get saying things, and I was kind of like scaring myself how much fun I was having just being an absolute arsehole.
You could, my first playthrough, I was negotiating, with the opposition, with the leaders of the Liberal Party, and all. I tried to get them to come on board with, my decision for the Constitution. In my second playthrough, I just had them murdered.
I didn't get to that point yet, but
I think, I had him arrested on trumped up charges. Again, going back to that, I'm sure he was very frustrated with that. And then his replacement, I can't remember who it was, but it was a woman in his party. And then I think your advisor, Lucien Grande, I think he just came out to me and said, well, look, do you want to just have her murdered? And I just went, yeah, sure, why not?
Wow.
Again, not in real life. I do not condone this in real life. I need to stress this. But in the game, like you said, it was a lot of fun. This is easy. And I just took over the news organizations, and to the point where there's news stories that happen constantly from the different newspapers.
Yes. Yeah.
That just stopped in my second playthrough. And I thought, this is kind of sad, because I enjoyed reading, different, what some are left leaning, others are more, economy, foreign policy, right wing. But I just, all of them just stopped, apart from the economy one. But I just took over the media.
What? Yeah, I didn't get.
And it's very different. I had the secret police as well. That's in my second playthrough, which I just became full dictator, but it affected as well the trade deals, even with Wayland, even with that guy, with the Saddam Hussein guy. He's like, yeah, this is a bit too extreme for me.
Yeah. I'm gonna have the Bloods back. I don't think that's a bad ego. But no, I didn't get to that. I'm not to that point. But I think because I ended up reading a bit about things that can happen and stuff, and I was leaning towards more of that kind of thing. I was like, there's moments where you can kind of because your wife becomes a key character at certain points, and like there's because there's parts where she gets really kind of passionate with women's rights, and she gets involved, I think, with we'll get some I think it's Kiera Walder, who's like the Minister of Education, who's very left leaning.
Yeah,
who's like the most progressive person, who's very much for women's rights and like very extreme left. And like she wants to kind of like speak at this school, but then like you have to,
but
and
it's like, well, okay, sure, but the guy who's speaking, I think, is a member of the party, an influential member of the party, and you need his votes for the Constitution. I think something like that.
But I think so. I let her speak in the first playthrough. On the second, I mean, on the second playthrough, I was just mean to everyone. I was like mean to my kids, like because I was like kind of nice to everyone. I was kind of like supportive to, I think, because you've got two children. I mean, Ansel's got two children. You've got like a girl who's about 6 or 7, and I think a 16, 17-year-old son who's like a bit of a, he's like crafting his own kind of stuff, and it was a bit combative on the first one, but I was all trying kind of nice to him. I was a massive dick to my son. It's like, but there's a bit as well. But there's a bit where he'll ask you questions about your past.
Yes,
about past and stuff. Yeah, and I didn't tell him. I didn't tell him because I was trying to maintain a kind of almost quiet, tortured. I like give the impression that Rain has seen shit, and I want to change it for the better. Whereas like. My rationale for the second one is that Frank, I think his name, his son, was pretty much saying that, like, what happened? So I said, oh, do you want to know what happened? Basically told him everything. And he goes, I watched a woman get squashed by a tank. Yeah. And I basically scarred my kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did on my first playthrough. I thought, I want to kind of like tell him the truth about reality. That my first playthrough, I was, fighting the military in the prologue. And then my second playthrough, I was hiding in the bed.
Yeah.
Hiding in my bedroom.
Yeah. But that prologue, that, again, you mentioned the prologue, but that prologue is great.
For it's really, really good.
But you've had the option as well. So, like, you can just say, like, the first time you play, you probably don't fully understand what's going on. So, like, say, oh, you're in this wealthy section, blah, blah, blah. But then what happens is, if you say, oh, I grew up in, I think there's a section.
Sword or something. Or so if you grew up poor, rich, or middle class, I can't remember the exact cities.
Yeah, I think if there's for example, I think
is it Lockhaven and Dare?
Yeah, Dare. I think Berkshire. I think is supposed to be is quite like. It's not the most rural part, but I think the Dare city area is quite affluent and quite expensive.
Rural.
But if you go, if you pick, I think it's that one. I think, but one of them, if you pick from like a kind of like well-off, educated background, you have you start with like a personal wealth of about 7. So you start with a bigger personal wealth, but you also have the support of that. But then people in the lower end of like in like the poorer areas, the rural areas, are more inclined to distrust you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then if you choose to come from the kind of like lower income stuff areas. Right, then you're going to have that more support because people see you as one of them. And I didn't realise that until I started researching for this episode. Yeah, so that kind of changes.
I need to play it again.
Yeah, I'm going to either buy it. I need to get it on my phone or something, so I can just either on my phone or tablet, so I can just sit and play it, or get it on my Switch or something, because just it'll become more casual player. Just to like casually play it for about 20 minutes a night or something. But but that changes it. So, I mean, reading about the personal wealth, part of me wants to do that because you can put a lot of your personal wealth to projects, and that might help the economy, I think, in the way that I play it. But then you get kind of questions about whether you served in the military. There's a couple of pivotal things which kind of you have to kind of make decisions about. There's as you mentioned, about the kind of immigrants, if you have to stop them or go against your commanders and stuff, which I think affects your relationship with the the military minister, Youssef. There's a moment where you see a young woman get squashed about to get run over by a tank, and you got the option to just not say anything or try and help her. And I mean, should I anyway? But then. That decision kind of gets brought up quite a lot because it kind of crafts
the kind of person that your character is. Yeah,
because it gets brought up a few times before a couple of major decisions and stuff. And again, you talk about I think, and I've not figured out how this affects you, but you can change what you study, so you can be like in agriculture or political science or history or literature. I think
probably with your interaction with the members of the cabinet, depending on, I imagine.
Yeah, because I think
you could replay this so many times and get something new.
Yeah, it's like,
as well, which is one of the great things about it.
I think so. Unavare is one of my favorite. Is one of my favorite modern adventure games, and the fact that you can change the job, and it changes the game blew my mind. So this broke me. So this broke me. I mean, yeah, and the fact, the impact it has, it's ridiculous. But yeah, I think talking about, I kind of want to replay.
Go back. And then I'm curious to know, certainly in your first playthrough, with the potential war with Rumburg, how did you deal with the tensions, shall we say, with Rumburg in your first playthrough? I can't
remember, but I never went to war.
Yeah, I didn't either. And I thought that was one of the reasons why I didn't think I would be arrested.
Yeah.
I thought because there was, just, it's building up, but there's a section where I think one of your pilots is flying over and is shot down and I think killed by Rumburg. Now, Rumburg said that they were in their territory. Your commanders, your military said that he wasn't. So you have to decide then, do we shoot down, I think, one of their pilots, or do we just refrain from doing, de-escalate the situation? Now, I chose to de-escalate the situation. I kind of talked with Rumburg and we managed to avoid a war, but Yosef was against that. He was saying, no, you look weak now. And I think that was one of the reasons why. But I was kind of, as I said, annoyed in first playthrough because I avoided the pandemic, I avoided war, I improved the workers' rights and the women's rights. But then again, he probably doesn't care about any of that.
Yeah.
He was like,
But then again, though, I crashed the economy even worse than bloody Alfonso did. So, there's workers' rights. Workers' rights. Workers can't afford anything.
That is true. I think there was even more unemployment in my first playthrough.
Yeah.
But then in my second playthrough, when I went all dictator, and I chose to declare war on Rumburg.
Okay.
And now I didn't have any allies because I had declared. So when that communist politician Bernard Sirikas was killed, and I just declared an act of emergency throughout my entire term, and even in Welland and countries around, they're saying, we're not going to do any trade deal with you because of the act of emergency, because of the instability in your country. So I basically had no allies. And then I declared war on Rumburg, who are a much bigger country, have a much bigger army. And even Yosef was saying, but this is not a good idea. But okay, let's do it anyway. So we devised a plan. We invaded Rumburg. It didn't go well.
Yeah.
They kind of basically stopped us at the border, and then they invaded Swordland. And and the way that, and now again, even then you have different choices that it can end differently. But Yosef became, he gave his life for me in that second playthrough. I was in the office and I think I had a gun. I think you can try and choose to either shoot yourself or shoot the soldiers from Rumburg, but they took the gun off me and arrested me. And then in the prison, I think they're going to hang me, and the Queen Beatrice comes. And then again, there in the prison, you can choose to try and get a knife and try and stab her. Or and then I tried to do that, but they ended up just killing me. So I had an ignoble death the second time. It just went horribly, horribly wrong. But it was up until that point, being this really far-right dictator, going even more far-right, more than far-right, I was able to get things done. Like, I wasn't helping the economy at all or anything, but I was able to kind of just having the opposition murdered, just completely taking over the media. And it's like, okay, but to the point where it got nearly boring.
I think that
there's a complete dictatorship. It went all kind of dictator on it. But
what's interesting, why you bring up, I think, Bernard Circus.
Yes, because that's a catalyst for a lot of things that happen early on in the game. Whatever playthrough you have, it's so he was just murdered at this your inauguration. And then you can choose how to respond to that.
I think, because I get the impression that, I think Bernard Circus, the impression you get is that he's very much he was a politician, very much in the Jeremy Corbyn, Bernie Sanders left wing stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's like I think, not the Red Sword, Young Swords, the right. There's a faction on the left, the Red something, who are very much on the communist side, which.
The People's Freedom. No, is it the People's Freedom and Justice? No, I know what you mean. The Red, yeah, but yeah, and so they were I can't find it here now, but yeah, they were kind of like basically the communist, the very left leaning party, and the Young Swords, I think, were the far right wing, the nationalists.
Yeah, but so pretty much like the kind of like left socialist elements of society kind of like start doing kind of what like kind of demand like retribution over something and stuff. And in reading you do find it. I think if you do a certain amount of time, you actually find out who orchestrated his death.
I didn't get that done in either of my playthroughs. Yeah. But I did read. I think you can find out.
Yeah, because I think because it turns out it's one of your. I think it's one of your. I know which one it is.
Cabinet members.
Yeah. So it's one of the cabinet members who's.
And I had no idea. I didn't. Yeah. I would love to replay this game with a walkthrough to find out, how to get to, because apparently you can. I think you can even join the two parties. You can join the Young Swords. Or not the Young Swords, the far right opposition party or the liberal opposition party, and you can nearly campaign for either of them depending on the decisions that you make. Well, that's so fascinating. I was like, that's kind of what I probably, because if my first playthrough, I mean, let's face it, I probably would have been better off in the Liberal Party.
Yeah,
that's what I kind of or at least my character Anthony Ryan agreed with most. But you don't have the conservative elements of the party to deal with. And then in the second playthrough, probably would have gone with the other party. But I didn't get those endings. But yeah, I'm curious to know how if you replay it.
Yeah, but I think because it's not apparent in the first playthroughs, but like there are actually proper villains in some of the characters and stuff. Like I think it's Lilias and I think the Chief Justice.
Yes.
Orson Hawker, who's like constant bang. Well, to be fair, yeah.
Yeah, he was awful.
Yeah, which actually saying that, I think as well. I mean, there's quite a few memorable characters. They're not large than life kind of. They're not large.
Yeah, that is true. Actually,
like they're not large than life.
And the oligarchs.
Yeah, so they're not larger than life kind of characters that are probably.
But they feel realistic.
Yeah.
I mean, so some could say they feel more realistic than real life people.
Yeah. So they're not. So they're probably not going to end up being kind of like. They're not going to be like the kind of narrative like. Things,
the most memorable
characters. Say like when people suddenly think of stuff, he goes, "Oh, you think of, I don't know, like Murray the Talking Skull from, or the narrator from the Stanley Parable, or GLaDOS or something like that." So I don't think any of the cast are going to jump out. Characters are going to jump out, but it's a shame because I think you start to get a sense of these people and you get to like them. I mean, like the amount of memes saying, I think your driver Serge Volkner, he's like the most nicest person in the world.
He's one of people's most, I think, favorite characters.
Yeah.
I think I saw online that people said, "Oh yeah, that they really liked that character because he's so nice."
Yeah.
Because
he's
genuine. One of the few genuine people probably in the game.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, who doesn't have his own quote unquote agenda. He just like is driving the president, whoever he or she is, and just takes an interest. He takes a genuine interest in you and in your family, and talk a little bit about himself as well. And you just realize that he's just like a normal, everyday person who just wants to get by in life. He just doesn't really care about politics. Just like, I just have my own family. I just want to be there for my kids. I just want to enjoy life and just have enough money to live on. And but taking an interest in other people, including yourself. And which is kind of nice to see.
Yeah, because I was horrible. Because I'm not saying I'm not finished it, but I just was absolutely horrible and rude to him the whole time, and he's still like the most loyal stuff. And there's moments where I think there are parts where I've not got to these, but apparently there's parts where apparently he can get assassinated or he'll give your life. Apparently there's a moment where he'll actually sacrifice himself to save.
I probably know
well.
which part that is. Yeah. I think that's later on in the game when isn't that at the is it the parade? I imagine.
But I know in the first one I got quite close and he was like heart to heart, and I think I paid for his son to go through. I think I paid for his son. Yeah,
I felt like doing that in my first playthrough when I was playing like the nice guy, but I didn't, because I thought, oh no, I shouldn't be kind of doing that. I should be using that money on, I don't know, on the country as a whole. But the one, what I thought was interesting as well was the whole thing with your vice president.
Yes.
Now I think
Peter.
Now, not really a criticism of the game, but I think, you do have a lot of choices which are going to shape a character, but then with the whole cabinet, it's all decided for you. Now, I imagine there are reasons why, because it's intentional, I believe, that it's half are conservative, half are liberal, and it's also for the story to play out the way it does, you need these people. But I think for myself, I would never have chosen Petr Vektor as my VP. In real, because I was just thinking, he's going to cause problems, from the very beginning. And it also shows why your best friend, you should probably never work with them.
Yeah, I don't know whether I don't know if there's is there a story reason why you can't change a cabinet? I can't remember.
Well, again, with him, do you remember the whole, again, really big spoilers, which I think we went past that, but the spy thing? Remember, he's having an affair with Livia Suno, the secretary to the president. Yeah.
It turns out to be a massive spy for Rumberg.
Pretty much. And in my first playthrough, I kind of did throw him under the bus to try and save the party, and he ended up committing suicide. Yeah. So I don't know what happened in your playthrough. Did the same thing happen to you?
Yeah, I don't think it was confirmed, but I don't know whether, because you just find his car. You just find his car and his helmet and stuff. Yeah. But I kind of threw him. I did kind of throw him under the bus and stuff, and I was listening a lot to the advisor Lucien Galland, and but then in the second playthrough, when you're being a real dick, he's kind of going along with it. Like, he was just saying, "Yeah, we can have this person murdered." What's interesting, though, I mean, so because you then get, did you have him as your vice president?
Yes,
both times.
No, the second time I just had the spy just killed, and just because I was in control of the media, that never got out.
So Petr was still there.
Yeah, and he's still happily going along as the VP and coming into meetings late and all, and with saying, yeah, we can do this and that. But the first time Lucien Galland was my VP.
It's like, Lucien, I think, is an interesting character as well, because he comes across as like he's someone who's always on time, and but the game kind of sets it up that I don't know if it's deliberate or not, but the game kind of seems to have him almost and as the hint system. I assumed he was like the hint system at first, so I was kind of agreeing with him.
But then it mightn't work, depending on the way you want to play through it.
So I thought Lucien was the game saying like, oh, before you do this, just remember that blah blah blah. And I thought, I'll play. I'll do what he says. But part of me thinking, oh, perhaps I shouldn't. But then reading into it more, what happens? I think if you go with if you go to a different vice president and not choose him, right, he basically blackmails you. So if you start doing things,
really,
Ooh. So what happens is that he actually keeps a note of everything that's happened and all your decisions, because he's usually in the room, isn't he? When you
and he's the very person who would know.
Yeah, so basically the person who the bodies is buried. I think for any UK, I think he's like Dominic Cummings, I think.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah. He's like the Dominic Cummings of, I mean, I'm sure like every country will have someone like him, the chief political strategist who would know the secrets of the politicians.
Where the bodies are buried,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Literally. Depending on how you play it. But it's fascinating, because then it turns out that he does have his own kind of agenda.
Yeah, which is kind of weird, because I've not got to that point. So I'm assuming that your both playthroughs, he was still loyal all the way through.
Yes, my second playthrough, he was still like, you can have this person murdered. We'll take control. He was actually advising me to take control of the media, just to keep them on side. Saying, oh no, this newspaper has a story about this scandal. I think we should just take over them. We should is it not privatize the other one, nationalize it. And just, the government will be in control of all the media stories.
It's fascinating. I think it's like...
And then Lilius Graf on my second playthrough was in charge of the secret police.
Yeah, but then depending on the playthrough, she's the person who pretty much ordered the murder of Bernard Circus.
Exactly, yeah, which I didn't get in my second playthrough either.
Yeah, but apparently you only know that if you do set up the secret police, but then not put her in charge, and they then discover that she's done it.
Oh, because I put her in charge. Oh, this is interesting.
Because you get the choice. Because I think I can't remember what his name is. There's the he's not in the assembly. I think he is. I don't think he's on the list. He's not in the cabinet, but he's in charge of. I think, the police chief. That's it, Carl Grazer.
Carl Grazer. Yes.
Yeah. He's the one who comes in and says, like, oh, I think you can put him in charge of it. And I think he eventually discovers. Yeah. But then again, yeah. So, but then I don't know if that leads to the more better ending, but then that still means you've created a secret police. you've created the Gestapo. I think the way to kind of, and apparently you can kind of have an ending which is a good ending to get to a second term and meeting quite a lot of targets. But I think you do have to kind of do a few decisions against. You kind of have to go
specific.
Against. Yeah, and I think the secret police is one of them in order to get justice for Bernard Circus, which is kind of weird.
Well, actually, on my first playthrough, when I was released from prison, and then this girl came and to talk about, interview me to write a book about my life.
Yes.
And it turned out that I can't remember her first name, but her last name was Syracuse.
Yeah. Yes.
So I thought that was a very nice way to end that.
Yeah, because I think
kind of not positive, but kind of like less negative than what it was, because it kind of did leave a sour taste, as being arrested would, for spending the last 20 years in prison and your wife then leaving you and all of that. But I think the game that it brought it back to this kind of bittersweet ending in the end.
Yeah, so
it wasn't all for nothing.
So I think it kind of like helps say that okay, the bad things happened, but then what you did in terms of certain things helped certain people. So I think particularly if you started going kind of liberal with the decisions, then the daughter of the murdered socialist kind of like then preaching and saying, I appreciate what you tried anyway. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I'll be interested to find out what happens if you find out if you discover the murder and stuff. And I've got to I've got the urge to play it again.
It's impossible, because like you could play this so many times and still have different kind of playthroughs, different things that you discover, which is one of the great. And I very rarely replay games. I just usually play them once and that's it.
Yeah.
But this game, almost immediately after playing the first time, I played it through a second time, which is unheard of for me.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
And I really want to play it a third time now, but there's so many other games, so many other things to do that I just never get around to it.
Well, this discussion is I kind of want to just like
go back to it.
I kind of want to end this early and just and get it on and buy it on my phone now. But I think again, I think as well. I think the majority of I don't think there's any kind of other outstanding.
I think we've covered most of the things. The spoiler.
Yeah, the key ones and stuff. I did quite like. I think it's David Whiskey. I think who's the foreign trades. I think who's.
Yeah, I liked him.
He's some. I think he's one of the characters who I think will stick by. And he'll disagree with some of the more.
Yeah, I mean, if you do go full dictator, I think he will kind of not be as loyal. But yeah, he's someone who is loyal to at least my first playthrough. He's one who kind of stuck with me.
I think depending on your course. Because he was my professor at university.
Mine is right in the game,
Yeah, so there's that kind of long, kind of like, he's like one of the more members of the cabinet that he's familiar with and stuff. And there's the very kind of, very weird, matter of fact, I think it's Simon Hall, who's the economic minister, who kind of like, who just seems to be, we can do this. And then if you go against it, goes, okay then. He's got this kind of like weird, okay then, and then goes and buys a winery. And and then
you can buy a football team in the game as well, which is what I should have done.
Wow.
You can buy a winery, you can buy a house in a fancy area in Holsterd, I think. You can do something else, and you can buy a football team. Now, I decided to buy a winery. And that was on my first playthrough. I was like completely above board, like, no, I'm not going to buy anything. Now, this is politics. And the guy just said, yeah, okay, fair enough, thank you. We never spoke about it again. But the second time I was putting, stocks in, I decided to buy a winery. But then I just ruined it all by declaring war on Rumberg. And it would be interesting if I hadn't declared war on Rumberg. I probably would have gotten the ending that, yeah, you're a dictator and you have, I would have owned a winery. So I'm kind of curious. So this is why, it would have been nice to know, if you could just have, go back to certain sections of the game and go back from those decisions, before declaring war. But then I can also understand why the developer's like, nope, you can't go back. You'll have to play through the entire game again.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Because I think it would probably be interesting to see the sort of differences because, again, because I think on a technical level, I think I can't see how the hell it must have been a really, really big piece of paper with a massive flowchart. It's ridiculous.
It's just incredible and astonishing the amount of work that they, as we said, not even on the main plot of the game, just the backstory and the world building.
Yeah,
that you are in this world.
Yeah, I think
that almost like it could just literally be in a simulation. It would be nice in some ways, if you didn't even have to play the game, just go into this world and even if you're not the president, but just see how the game is going. I would be interested. Again, that would probably be adding a huge amount of extra work for developers. But it's the kind of game that I would be interested in just watching, kind of or just reading how it goes. But it's just astonishing.
Yeah, I think it's just, I've not played I think I've only played the first Mass Effect game, but the Mass Effect games, I think in terms of the story,
similar, I imagine, yeah.
Yeah, there's the kind of branching and stuff, and I think the fact that characters can get killed off, but then you can start to see other games and the characters in your playthroughs get killed off and stuff. And I thought, in my head, I'm thinking, oh God, how much did that take to program? Whereas I think, I mean, and compared to Mass Effect and Suzerain, it doesn't, the look of it is very different, but it's the amount of kind of branching and variable things that happen in this game. It's ridiculous. I can't see, all full credit on the technical side of how they managed to keep their head on it.
Absolutely, yeah. Because I know one of the criticisms of, say, Telltale games and other choose your own adventure type games is that choices don't matter, which, if you replay games, you can kind of see at times that there's more, the choices matter maybe for the character and how you approach other characters, but story-wise, it's still going to have, the same things more or less happening. And you can, at times, maybe in this game, but overall, with that, depending on your choices, you can go to vastly different places in the game and vastly different decisions that, from at least from my first playthrough and my second playthrough, they're wildly different. And I think that is one of the huge successes of this game. I will say what I wanted as well, and I did get a little bit more in my second playthrough when everyone was against me, but I kind of wanted more, in Parliament, debating with the opposition. I would have liked more debates in Parliament, which I didn't get, or at least in my playthroughs. Maybe there is another playthrough you can get, but I would have liked, in because I always enjoy, in the UK, the part where everyone go, hey!
The Prime Minister's questions.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know why I always seem to try and keep an eye on that and stuff, and I don't know why. It's just, there's just something weirdly addictive in watching it.
It's kind of entertaining, and I know that, the argument people might have is okay, maybe it shouldn't be, maybe everyone else should keep quiet. But it's, but it is, I want to kind of some more of that. And then again, I don't know if that was the way it's done in Turkey and other countries that this game is based on. And even the US, I don't think, I don't think the president really debates that often with opposition. It's more in the UK with Prime Minister questions. But I would have liked a little bit more of that. And some more, there is one second we do have the interview, but I would have liked maybe more press conferences as well and dealing with the press. But these are extremely minor, not even criticism, more of what I would have liked personally.
Yeah. But I still think now that I kind of agree with you, because I quite like the kind of the pantomime of politics more or less and stuff. And I think the moments when you are in the assembly and you can kind of hear the crowd noises in the soundtrack and the jeering and stuff that appears in the sound design and stuff. You kind of get caught into it, but Yeah, but I mean, overall, though, I think that, as we mentioned the writing at the start, it's a game that somehow, considering it's just floating text and clicking on buttons, it's amazing how much you get emotionally invested into it. Like again, with the stuff that happens with Peter and stuff, and the choice you have to make, I was there for a good few minutes thinking, what the flipping heck am I going to do? And then, and the game kind of, and I was like kind of agonising about where to throw him under the bus, and it took me a while to click on that. So I was there kind of hovering the mouse over going, what do I do? And then that kind of emotional attachment's kind of rare, I think, you can get.
Yeah. No, absolutely. As I said, I was thinking about this game outside of it. And it's just the kind of game that you do become emotionally invested in. And it's just, just the little markers on a map.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, definitely it is one of my favorites, certainly recent games. One of the games that I've become really, really interested in.
Yeah.
And I think huge credit to them. I think it's their first game. I mean, they probably worked on other games themselves, but for Torpor Games, I believe this is their first game that they have made. And it's one of my favorites, certainly modern times, and I'd say of all time, that I could still spend hours talking about this game. And this is a game that I would hand to just anyone, saying, yeah, go ahead and play this. And just, I think the marketing would be, or the way that I would promote it is, hey, if you think you can be a better president, prime minister than your current prime minister, now's your chance to prove it.
No, definitely, yeah, completely agree with it. So, but I think before we kind of wrap up, because unfortunately this conversation will have to end at some point, which is a shame.
I know. I think we should probably end.
Mainly so I can just have a look and see how much it is on the phone, because I might end up either that or the Switch, because I am kind of really tempted to play it again now. But I think before we move on, the game world itself, I think, is kind of big. I think the interview from 2021 that you said, you asked him the question about how much have you become invested in the universe you've created, and are you looking at other games into this? And he was quite cagey. He says, like, we've got one or two ideas, but we can't say anything. But since then, I think like last year they announced kind of prequel game.
So what I remember him saying is, because of the different endings and the different variations of the endings, a direct sequel would be very difficult, because it would make one of those endings canon. And what he wants to do is he wants, whatever ending you get, that to be your canon. So he didn't want to kind of like ignore any of those endings. So what he was saying is a direct sequel would be very difficult. So they're looking at different options for, the next game. What they have announced is, as you mentioned, a prequel set in the same universe. It's called The Conformist. As even visually, it's going to be very different. It's a more personal narrative adventure game, at least according to tvtropes.org. And you play as a guy called Orwin. And you're a Swordland propagandist shortly after the country civil war. Now, I think this might be a little bit more traditional, that it's, you see the character, you control the character, and, there's screenshots of the game. So it seems to be more like typical adventure / RPG, that less text involved from what I can see. Mm-hmm. That's, so they have been working on that. They have two other games as well. Now, I think these could be more like DLCs from what I understand. Again, I could be wrong, but they're two code names. They haven't announced the actual names, but they're code name Project Taurus and Project Amendment. Now, we don't know. We know very, very little from what they have is every month they have a broadcast. So I would recommend that people sign up to the website to subscribe to their news reports, news releases every month. And so to give a little bit more now, again, they haven't released many details, but we do know that they are working. They've hired more people in the company, which is a good sign. And they're working on these three projects. So The Conformist, and then Project Taurus and Project Amendment. Very little that I know, at least, of these. But I am following it very closely, and I will be mentioning it on the Adventure Game podcast as soon as there's any news. And I would love to speak to him again now that we've played it.
No, definitely interesting. So are they confirmed to be in the same universe?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, Conformist definitely is, because Conformist, because it pretty much on the website says based on the Suzerain universe, and you are under Tarquin's soul.
And I believe it has a website.
It is, yeah. I've got it open at the moment, so it's got like it's about propaganda and political movements. So I'm quite interested into that. Well, at the moment, on the strength of this game itself, I'm kind of like they can probably announce like a basic time phone book, and I'll probably buy it.
I want to say if they had like a novel or a book or anything, or just anything extra, I'd be like, yeah, I think they do have merchandise as well, with to do with the game, which I haven't got yet, but it is, definitely, So I think it's the type of game that you could definitely get really, really involved in.
And I think
which people have.
And I think it's nice that they're continuing to build in that world. And I think as I said in an interview, I think they spent so much time, and there's so much kind of alternative history and things they can do. They could probably focus on other aspects of
like the whole world basically.
Yeah,
could go prequel set in during the Kingdom, which we didn't talk about, or during the Civil War, or during the reign with the Conformist will of Tarquin's soul. And again, it wouldn't really spoil anything from this game. It wouldn't spoil any of the endings. So yeah.
So like or even if something, even at the same time, they can probably just not mention Swordland, or just have a passing reference to it, or something like.
Or it could be set in another country, or another continent.
I mean,
there's so much you could do. It could be like the Star Wars of, I don't know, of adventure games. So much.
The Suzerain franchise.
Yeah, I mean, they could do that theoretically, but yeah. So look forward to hopefully speaking to Atta again in future, and hopefully speaking to you in future.
Yeah. Definitely, yeah. So that is Suzerain.
This very long recording. Apologies for that, Matt.
No, it's fine. I mean, I was expecting this to be like a massive love fest, which it is, and to be fair, it's a game that deserves it. And if you've gotten this far, well, thank you. If you've got your own kind of thoughts, feelings, opinions about Suzerain, please feel free to either message me on Twitter, Instagram, or even an email under askusaboutloom@gmail.com. So feel free to do that. But before we go, Seoirse, thank you ever so much for coming on again.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
No, it's fine. I thought you're the reason I ended up getting sucked into this game, so I thought you might.
Oh well, no, I'm delighted to hear. Hopefully, other people will play this game as well. And look, again, if anyone out there would like to talk, I said to either of us, send you a message on Twitter, or send me, and I'd be delighted to talk to anyone about theories or about different playthroughs and just what people found, because I really do, as I'm sure people have found out if you're still listening now, that we really, really like this game.
Exactly. But so if people want to find you and your podcast, where can they find you?
Well, we have the website, adventuregamespodcast.com. All of the episodes are there, and just everything is there. You can also find us anywhere you listen to podcasts, so on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, just anywhere as well. We do have a YouTube channel, which occasionally I do update, but not as much as I probably should. But some of the interviews that I do are there as well, the ones that I do on video, you just type in Adventure Games Podcast on YouTube. We're also on Twitter, which is what I usually mainly use for as long as Twitter exists. I imagine I'm still there.
Yeah,
at
same.
Advent Game Pod, on Instagram as well, at Adventure Games Podcast there as well. And those are the main ones. We do have a Facebook, but I haven't had the time to really work on that. So sticking mainly with Twitter and Instagram. I tried Mastodon, but I've just kind of stopped using that.
Oh, yeah, I had a quick look, but
it's too difficult.
Yeah, I did look. I have started looking into Substack, because Substack is beginning to incorporate shorter.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Shorter term stuff, which I'm keeping an eye on. I'm keeping an eye on with other podcasts of mine, but
okay.
So yeah, but again, Seoirse, thank you so much, and I can't recommend the Adventure Game Podcast enough. My wallet,
thank you.
My wallet and credit card hate you.
Thank you, Jen. And also this one, I mean, I know this is another love-in. We had it for the game. But I really enjoy the idea of this podcast, of getting, one or two people in every episode to go in detail about the games as well. And I enjoy listening. I've listened to your other episodes on the other games as well. So I hope you continue.
Yeah, I hope to. Yeah,
you do. And likewise, if you want me to waffle on again in future, I'd be delighted to come on. But
more than welcome. More than welcome. So, and I think with that, if you want to follow Ask Us About Loom, you can do so on Twitter and Instagram under Ask Us About Loom. I'm pretty sure I'm the only one with that name, so feel free to mention that. Also, as always as well, I've got too many other podcasts, including a Red Dwarf one called Shipwrecks and Comatose, my kind of fortnightly one, Bigger Disc, which is a music-based one, and a Yellow Jackets one, which is at the time recording in the middle of season 2.
To watch that.
Yeah, season 2. Yeah, so if any Yellow Jackets fans are listening, look for No Book Club, which is the Yellow Jackets podcast that I do as well. So so that's it. Again, Seoirse, thank you ever so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Matt.
No, it's fine.
And we'll keep in touch, hopefully.
Yeah, no worries. And so so this is the end of the kind of like the first special to kind of ease people back into hopefully season 2 when I have a batch of regular episodes coming at the end of the year. I am organising an episode for July with Ian, who's been on a couple of times, talking about Gone Home and Return to Monkey Island, and that's going to be about immortality. So I'm finally going to be talking about my favourite game last year. With that, thank you for listening, and all you listeners, I'll see you in July.
100 years since Nosferatu first terrified audiences on the big screen.
30 years since Francis Ford Coppola gave us Bram Stoker's Dracula.
And 10 years since Dark Shadows with Johnny Depp.
Vampire Videos is a podcast taking a look at this iconic blood-sucking monster on film and television.
I'm Dan Owen.
And I'm Hugh McStay.
And we're here to guide you through a century of vampirism on film. From Hollywood's golden age with Bela Lugosi as Count Dracula,
to the more lurid hammer horrors of the 60s and 70s starring Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee.
Through to the 80s boom in vampires, which brought these creatures of the night into the modern age.
And everything this century's had to offer us, from foreign and independent films, spoof comedies, and even teenage love stories. Yes, I'm talking about Twilight.
We aim to cover it all, one bite at a time.
So join us on a voyage into the depths of vampire cinema, old and new, with weekly guests offering their own insights and expertise. And why not follow us on Twitter @VampVideos?
A proud part of the We Made This podcast network. Subscribe now to Vampire Videos, and thanks for listening.